Preserving History. I'm Lisa Oligus, and this is Newsmakers. In this edition, the effort to save and preserve the Newtonia battlefields in Newtonia, Missouri is moving to a new threshold. Today, we discuss the process of turning it into a national park and historic site. Currently, it is the Newtonia Battlefields Protection Association that preserves the Matthew H. Ritchie home and 25 acres surrounding the 1862 and 1864 battlefields. The Ritchie home served as both Union and Confederate headquarters at different times during the battles. Joining us to share details of this process and this history today are Marion Lyles, Tom Higdon, and Eddie McAllister. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you for asking.
So this is some wonderful history. Tell us what's happening now, because this is a big step for you all to become a national park.
It's a very exciting time for us, and it's kind of the culmination of a decades-long dream of many of our members, and it really means that the history of Newtonia will be preserved for the future.
So when did you get the national park status?
Well, Senator Blunt, way back when I think it was the 2022 budget omnibus bill, put that Newtonia battlefield would become and I don't really know the word, would fall under the Wilson's Creek battlefield in Springfield. So that got the ball rolling. Now, unfortunately, there was no money appropriated for 2024. And we still don't know if there's going to be money for 2025. We haven't heard that word yet, so we're continuing to drive on.
Okay. Well, so tell us exactly what it takes to get national park status and what this process has been like. It's been kind of a long ordeal. You said a decade. Tom, what kind of work goes into doing something like this?
Well, we had to do several surveys and archaeological digs to find out what we had there, to show them proof. And then we have been working with Senator Blunt and when he was a congressman too before that. So it's been over a decade in some ways, but the main emphasis has been the last decade. And a lot of correspondence, a lot of phone calls, a lot of visits, and back and forth with the Park Service, as well as Senator Blunt.
Yeah. So do you have to have a connection to Wilson's Creek? Is it just that that's already got that status, or are they tying those battles together?
When Wilson's Creek was brought on, it was George Washington Carver was their sponsor. Okay. And they do administrative duties for them. And, all types of technical budget things. They know how the National Park System works. And it's a very large system, and it's very diverse.
This means giving the Park Service the property. So how is that a change from what it was before? Some of this was privately owned property. How long has it all been part of the association? Eddie and Tom, can you kind of weigh in on that too?
We had the opportunity to purchase the property in 2002. We bought 3 different segments of land from 3 different parties, and we already had 8 acres that had been given to us earlier, back in I think '98. And then we also have the use of the Civil War cemetery adjacent to this to protect and to take care of. You can't own it, but so that was a big first step right there. Once we had that property, we could start working on it and getting it ready to be brought into the Park Service.
Eddie, how is this important in ensuring its preservation?
Well, most parks that I know of, I've never heard of the federal government closing a park. We are a farm community, and there's always the chance that all of the battlefield gets bought up by one of the neighboring farmers or whatever. Mm-hmm. Not that they're against what we've got, but if we lose it, it'd be like some of the other national military parks that there were some down south that had like Pizza Huts built on some major parts of battlefields. Mm-hmm. We're just trying to protect any little piece of what we've got.
Sure. And so has it been a challenge over the years you said you had to buy that. How do you obtain all that property? I mean, was it a lot of fundraisers, and does this kind of help maintain that property as well and keep it in good shape?
We really hadn't prepared ourselves to buy the property at the time when it came available. Therefore, we had to go after some kind of a grant, mm-hmm. and we did. We got a grant through the Conservation and American Battlefield program, and but it was a 50-50 grant. We had to match half of it, and the other half came from local people that loaned the money to us to match that money, and that allowed us to jump right on in and get it. So we were really tickled to get that property in 2002.
So talk to me about, I mean, was it ever at risk? I mean, were you worried that this property, could go by the wayside?
Oh, yeah. The house itself had been mainly in Matthew Ritchie's family's hands for a long time, but in the last 70 years, it had changed hands into different families who didn't have the strong connection to the property that a family member of Matthew's would have had. And, there's nothing that anybody can say. You own the property. You can do what you want with the property.
Right.
We wanted to get a hold of the house mainly to preserve the integrity of what it was when Matthew set up homestead on that property.
So let's talk about, has there been a cost that you've had? I mean, you got the grant, you got donations. Is there a regular cost of just taking care of it?
Yes. Last year we spent almost $10,000, Tom.
Yes.
And that's to maintenance, insurance. Insurance is one of our bigger costs, and utilities. So, and doing all the mowing, doing all the tree services, grounds and maintenance is a big thing. And we're a volunteer organization, and with that there's a risk there. In that people come and go, people die, people move, and having a big backer like the federal government is going hopefully to mean this moves into the future long beyond us.
Yeah.
I think that was the main reason too, Bill and Eddie and Lisa, that we were concerned about was the age of our board. We're a much older board. Eddie's a youngster in the family. He's the baby in the family, but the rest of us are 70s and 80 years old. We're not going to be here forever. We were worried about us passing on, not getting enough help to help Eddie and others that live on to finish the project. And certainly not only the age, but the fact of money. Donations are becoming harder to get. Fundraisers don't always raise the amount of money we need.
Sure.
So those two items there was our main concern.
So I know you've had reenactments there. Eddie, tell us how you got involved and a little bit about that role and why you feel a connection.
Well, I got into reenacting when I was around 27 years old. Mainly what I wanted to do was just kind of teach the story of the American Civil War a little bit better than what maybe some of the school teachers were teaching it. Because school books, they don't tell the complete story sometimes.
Sure.
And I was just kind of looking for some material to make some kind of uniform. At the time, probably a federal uniform. And ended up being sent into contact with a gentleman here in Joplin that had a Confederate reenacting unit. So I ended up in a Confederate reenacting unit that we also do the federal side. It's really hard to do a reenactment. Everybody wants to be a Confederate. I don't know if it's I don't know why. I don't know if it's the Gone with the Wind part of it or whatever.
Yeah.
But one evening, sitting around a campfire, this whole Confederate unit, the captain walks up and says, "Hey guys, as soon as you can, you need to buy the blue uniform. Because there's times when we have to make the reenactment look right. You can't have 500 Confederates fighting 20 Yankees, and the Yankees are supposed to win that battle.
Yeah.
That's just not right." And we called it galvanizing. You would just get up on Sunday morning, maybe, if you was going to be Yankees on Sunday, put the blue uniform on, and you went to their side. And I thought, from getting into that hobby, it has gave me a lot more chances to get into schools to where you can actually talk to kids. And it's amazing. I had a principal tell me one time that I needed to be a school teacher, and I'm like, I don't think so. She goes, "I've never seen anybody hold a bunch of kindergartners at attention for an hour and a half, like my little assembly that I gave them." And I kind of, being a wisecracker, I said, yeah, but I was holding a rifle. You know, that's...
Well, there's a lot of rich history there. We're going to take a break, and we're going to talk a lot more about history in a moment. As we go to break, thoughts from Senator Roy Blunt, who was instrumental in securing that national park status for the Newtonia Battlegrounds, and a video tour of the site.
In a town that has a population of 199, who would have guessed that it is home to a historic site?
One of the reasons it's unique, it has both one of the first battles in Missouri in the Civil War and the last battle in Missouri in the Civil War. The mining area, the lead mines, all of that made that location a location where there was a natural coming together.
That location is Newtonia, Missouri, where national park status means it'll be a place to experience history. This is what you can see. The Ritchie Mansion. After building his barn, a mansion, and a mill in 1851, Matthew Ritchie laid out the town of Newtonia in 1854. He helped establish businesses and donated land to create a school. In 1861, when the war that divided the nation began, Ritchie, who had served as a county judge and state legislator, supported the Union. His properties were highly sought after by leaders of both sides of the war. What made his land so desirable? Well, multiple springs like Newtonia Branch offered water, and the land was great for farming, which provided much needed supplies for soldiers.
And horses and mules can't move hardly at all without having some kind of nourishment. They could always get them hay, straw, anything they needed here. The farms around here was abundant. Almost every little town had a mill. The mills were abundant. Matthew had a mill in this town where you could get corn ground up and, you know, you could make your flour for your bread.
The first Civil War Battle of Newtonia happened in 1862. Confederate forces took over both buildings. The mansion became their headquarters and also served as a hospital. The Ritchie Barn was a 3-story building which made it perfect for stocking supplies, but also made it a good spot for fighting, giving Confederate soldiers higher ground.
At the time of the battles of Newtonia, the Confederates held the barn, and it's kind of like being in a fort. It's an all-stone barn. They ran a cannon up into the top floor of the barn and was shooting out the windows north towards the Federal Army that was advancing on town.
This post marks one of the corners of the Ritchie Barn, which was the main focus for both battles. Here is where the fighting took place and for miles beyond.
The Federal Army would have been facing south, and they would have been lined up just in a straight line. And their straight line didn't have to be north, south, east, west. It could have been at angles, but it was always a straight line, shoulder to shoulder.
The mansion itself became a target in the battles. Soldiers shot from the windows on the second floor of the house, defending it. You can even see where one cannonball was removed from a brick corner of the structure, while others made it inside, leaving their mark on the bottom of a staircase. A museum in the mansion showcases cannonballs, lead bullets, rifles, and more.
So they could use it on horseback. These are all 58 caliber rounds out of a rifle.
Also, in the museum, a mannequin displays an unissued uniform donated by the Eastern Shawnee tribe. This is what Native Americans would have worn in battles. An estimated 20,000 Native American soldiers fought in the Civil War. They fought in both battles at Newtonia, with the second battle occurring in the fall of 1864. But they didn't always fight on the same side.
I think the first, if not the only battle in the Civil War where Indian tribes on both sides fought directly against each other. So that's a story to be told.
A few tribes joined Union forces. The Shawnee, Wichita, Cherokee, Caddo, and Kickapoo tribes were members of the Home Guard. Home Guards were a group of non-enlisted citizens who took up arms to protect communities on a more local level. During the Second Battle of Newtonia in 1864, Matthew Ritchie's son, James M. Ritchie, held the rank of captain and was stationed in Newtonia. James Ritchie, First Lieutenant Robert H. Christian, is buried in the Civil War cemetery a few blocks away. According to local lore, he suffered a grisly death. Soldiers, both Union and Confederates, are believed to be buried here, some with stone markers that simply say unknown, while Christian, who posthumously gained rank of captain, has a more modern marker on his tombstone. Back at the Ritchie Mansion, Matthew Ritchie and his first and second wives are buried in the family plot, a family plot that can be seen from the mansion. A mansion that is itself a historic site, where visitors can learn about the life in the 1800s. Sadie Heisner takes us on a tour.
When you walk into the Ritchie Mansion, it is evident that this is an historical 1850s structure. Tom Higdon explains how the Ritchie home was much more than just a house.
The mantels that you see there, each room in the house has a fireplace. That's, of course, how they kept warm in the winter. and we're real proud to have that, and that's why this is a mansion.
Heading up, the original staircase will lead you to the bedrooms where there are closets besides the fireplaces.
But if you'll notice the closets, Mr. Ritchie was actually taxed for each closet as a room, and that's one reason it's called a mansion.
In one bedroom is Ritchie's original bed. Antique furniture and period clothing are on display, but the room itself has a history.
But the black room was used as a surgical room during the attack, and the bloodstains got so bad on the floor they couldn't clean them up, so they had to paint the floor black, and it's been black ever since.
When led into the other bedroom, you notice more period clothes, and a bed that's frame is made out of rope, a very unique feature that represents the era the house was built. Another stop on the tour leads you to a small museum of Civil War artifacts and items found around the Newtonia battlefields. An Indian Heritage Remembrance exhibit also is located in this room, as well as a painting done by Doug Hall, a famous Indian painter from Neosho.
We believe this is a original door, and some of the doors are and some of the doors aren't in the house.
Those other doors will need to be replaced, as well as the crown molding, which represents a different era. They will be removed when the house is restored as a historical site by the National Park Service.
Back in the 1800s, this kitchen didn't exist. They cooked outside, but this was added in the early 2000s to add convenience to the family who lived here. But in order to restore this house back to its original state, it's gonna have to go.
All the steps on the road to making the Ritchie Mansion and Newtonia battlefields the place to revisit history. In Newtonia, Sadie Heisner, KGCS TV.
Welcome back to Newsmakers, where we are learning about the historic site and national park status for the Ritchie Mansion and Newtonia battlefields. Our guests again are Marion Lyles, Tom Higdon, and Eddie McAllister. Gentlemen, thanks again for your wisdom and your knowledge. Let's talk history. So why is this site so significant? It was host to not just one major battle, but two in the Civil War. So Eddie, do you want to tell us the history of the two different battles, or one?
Well, yeah, the first battle of Newtonia was really a pretty major battle. I mean, as far as this area, Federal Army had kind of thought that there were some Confederates in southwest Missouri. They moved soldiers from Springfield to Sarcoxie, and then came down a Sarcoxie Road into Newtonia, where actually the first day's battle was kind of an accident. The Confederate pickets that was out guarding the town had orders not to fire on any federal soldiers that would show up, but they got in a fight, which pushed it back into town. And there were some instruction camps around in the area, Camp Coffee, and they could actually hear something was going on in Newtonia, so they brought just trainees in the Confederate Army into Newtonia to try to stop the Federal Army from coming on down into town and taking it. They wanted to hold on to everything they had. The Confederates had several different tribes of Indians that was actually fighting under regimental control. And also, at the same time, the 3rd Regiment of Home Guard was an Indian unit, mainly of Cherokees, some Creeks, that was on the side of the Federal Army.
So we had then Native Americans also fighting alongside, and then some fighting against each other.
At the Battle of Newtonia, we do know that they, and it's just the logistics of the battle, during the late morning or early afternoon, the two Indian units from both sides actually clashed and was in hand-to-hand combat.
Wow.
This research that I've always done with Native Americans, they weren't much on fighting with the gun, but they sure did like to use any hand-to-hand combat they could. That was more their deal, is to get up close and pretty much touch your enemy.
Right, so speaking of weapons, what were the kinds of weapons that would have been used in these Civil War battles at Newtonia?
Well, I think you had a variety. A lot of the soldiers at that time brought their weapons brought them from home. They weren't issued, especially the Confederates. They weren't issued. The Union troops were more, regimentalized and
exactly.
had that. You know more about that, Eddie.
We're talking muskets and cannons? And
Yes, muskets, cannons, different pistols, and that type of thing. And see, that's why it's so important that when you find bullets in the ground, and Eddie probably knows more about this than I do, but when you find bullets in the ground, that tells you what kind of weapons were used in the attack. When those bullets are removed and taken away, it destroys history.
Yeah.
It allows us to know.
And
exactly
you can
what
also
happened.
follow a battle by the soldiers of the day. They fought in straight lines. If you've got a line of soldiers lined up shoulder to shoulder and they're all firing their weapons, they're dropping stuff. Somebody later on, a good archaeologist, comes along and finds, we found bullets and they're all in a straight line. Now they can go back and see which company, regiment, whatever, was in that straight line. If you don't find them in a straight line, more than likely there wasn't actually a battle line there.
So
You
let's.
can-
So one battle was 1862. Who won, and then when was the next one?
The 1862 was a Confederate victory, for
Okay.
sure. It was a day-long battle, fought there around the Ritchie Mansion house that was used by the Confederates, had that position, and was used as a headquarters and a hospital. And during the battle, the Unions kept charging the wall, the stone wall that was around all the facility. Late in the afternoon, then, as Eddie had mentioned, the Indians fought against each other there on the east side of town. And the town, even today, is still very much like it was, modern houses, except for the mansion house. It dates back to the Civil War, but it's still a 3-by-5 block area, which is really, really neat, very, very pristine. So the Confederates finally won that, pushed them out, but they wasted that victory because they waited 3 days later. Union forces out of Springfield again came in and with about 30 cannons set up on the ridge, fired in and chased them off. So that was it. Do you want to say something about the second battle? Or?
Yes, let's go.
Sure.
Yeah, the second battle was part of Sterling Price's raid into Missouri in 1864. And Sterling Price had been governor of Missouri, and he was commander of the Missouri State Guard. And they fought at Wilson's Creek, and later they fought at Pea Ridge. But Sterling Price did not get along with Jefferson Davis because he was not West Point educated. And he was more of a volunteer. And so he didn't think that Sterling Price had a great deal of military aptitude. So Sterling Price hated when the Confederates abandoned Missouri. Really, they did that to move a lot of the forces to the Battle of Shiloh. And a lot of forces from Missouri and Arkansas fought at Shiloh and never made it back west. So Sterling Price thinks that he can, in 1864, can recruit Missourians for the Confederacy. And he launches an expedition. Now, he was from Lexington, Missouri, which is up on the Missouri River, and he was a big farm holder. So his idea was that he was going to march through Missouri and bring young soldiers back with him. Of course, he didn't have any boots, he didn't have any uniforms, and he didn't have any weapons to arm them with. And so, needless to say, the raid was less than successful.
Okay.
And he was defeated in a battle up by Kansas City, something called Brushy Creek. And his retreat, he retreated down the military road, which is now US 69 through Kansas, all the way down through Carthage and then to Newtonia.
Okay.
And they had stopped in Newtonia to rest. And that's where the Union soldiers met them again.
Okay. And this time the Union soldiers.
This is the October 1864 battle.
Okay.
And again, that battle was a Union victory.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the mansion. You said it was Confederate headquarters. At some point then it also became Union headquarters. What's distinctive about this? You said it stands kind of differently. It has unique architecture. Tell us about what makes the mansion so special.
Oh, go ahead. No.
Well, first Matthew Ritchie. Matthew Ritchie was what we would call an entrepreneur now. But for a long time I thought he was a Southerner, but he wasn't. He was a Unionist. But he was also a slaveholder.
Okay.
But he was classified as a conservative Unionist. But he didn't want Missouri to secede. And what I read said most of the people in Missouri didn't want to secede. So he was kind of not only a good businessman, he set up a mill. there in Newtonia that could grind grain. And he also had a store there. But after the Confederates left, his son, who was a captain in the Union Army, had a small garrison in Newtonia.
So did that mill, and then apparently there was a barn there, was all that attractive to them as a place to locate during the battlefield?
Yeah, that was certainly one of the good reasons. The fertile farmland, even today, it's still that way, would grow their crop that they needed to feed their horses and the men. And then also very close by were the Granby lead mines. And the Confederates used those lead mines to make their bullets and their ammunition and their cannonballs. The Union had factories up north to supply them, but the Confederates did use those mines to do that.
It's just about 6 miles down the road.
Yeah, just
So
over.
has this been all captured in history books? I know someone has written a book about it. And what will this be kind of as a history lesson for maybe children of the future when you make this a national park? I mean, there even is like a little museum in the mansion,
Yes,
correct?
inside. We do, and we love people to come in and see that and the rest of the house. The interesting thing about the books too, and about the history, is that I started talking to schools and organizations 50 years ago. You couldn't find very much about Newtonia. You couldn't find very much about the Civil War actually in Missouri. But as time has come along, the Trans-Mississippi, which what they call the Civil War West Mississippi, the Missouri and Arkansas and Kansas and Oklahoma, which then was Indian Territory, those all now are hitting the books. And there's several books. Newtonia is listed in several books now, as well as Carthage and other battles that occurred in Baxter Springs and Prairie Grove. You know, it's not just about Pea Ridge and Wilson's Creek. It's about these other smaller battles.
It's nice to know it's being recorded and going to be remembered.
Well, and that's like General Grant, who accepted Lee's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. He's a Missouri man. And that's kind of, he had a little bit of trouble to get into that Eastern Theater. They didn't think, they kind of thought people west of the Mississippi, they weren't up for that. But he proved to them.
Missouri connections made a difference.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, it's great history. Thank you so much for telling us all about it, and we wish you well in making it all happen and come to fruition with the national park status. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This could be the next great field trip excursion for local kids. We thank all of our guests for being here. That wraps up this edition of Newsmaker. Thanks to our guests, and thank you for watching.